standing and observe a moment of silent prayer or meditation in remembrance of those who lost their lives as a result of the recent devastating floods in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of the Eastern Cape. We also keep in prayer all those whose homes and livelihoods have been affected by this disaster. Please be seated.
Order. Order. Honorable members. Honorable members. The President has called this joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces in terms of Section 84(2)(d) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, read with Joint Rule 7(1)(a) in order to address Parliament on the devastation caused by the catastrophic flooding along parts of the eastern coast. I call on the Honorable the President.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Sihle Zikalala, the Premier of the Eastern Cape, Mr. Oscar Mabuyane, honorable members, at this hour across the nation, men and women of all faiths and beliefs are observing a moment of prayer for those who lost their lives and for those who are still suffering as a result of the catastrophic floods that ravaged parts of our country, as well as the fires that have displaced hundreds of people in this city. The National Religious Forum is conducting at this very minute a walk of witness at some of the flood-affected areas in KwaZulu-Natal to assess the situation and offer solidarity and pastoral care and counseling to those who've been affected. The National Religious Forum has called on all South Africans to use this time, 2 p.m. as we are meeting now, for a collective nationwide prayer event. We applaud our religious leaders for providing comfort, support, and encouragement at this very trying time of national grief. We have, through you, National Speaker of the Assembly, already had our moment of silence, and we're very pleased that we have joined the many thousands and millions of South Africans who are at this very moment observing this moment of prayer. Honorable members, fellow South Africans, 2 weeks ago, a great tragedy befell our nation, causing catastrophic loss of life and widespread destruction. The floods in parts of KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, and also including Northwest, were of such a force that they laid waste to nearly everything in their path. Hundreds of people lost their lives. Many are still missing. Hillsides, homes, roads, bridges, and other valuable infrastructure of our nation were washed away. Factories, warehouses, shops, public buildings, farms, and fields were flooded. Just when we were rebuilding our lives shattered by COVID-19 pandemic, just as our economy was beginning to show signs of recovery, we've now been plunged into mourning once again. I'd like to thank you for having agreed that this special joint session of Parliament should take place so that members of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces should have an opportunity to express solidarity for those who have passed away and those who are injured. It is correct and appropriate that as the elected representatives of the people of our country, you should also be involved in the work to rebuild the lives and the livelihoods that have been affected by these floods. The extent of this crisis calls for unity in action across the nation and within this Parliament as well, across party lines. If there ever was a moment when we should all be united in action and indeed in our grief and mourning, this is the time. I wish to pay tribute to the various parties that are represented here in this Parliament that have visited the affected areas and have been providing support, counseling, as well as mobilizing material assistance to our people who are affected by these floods. I wish to applaud the contribution of many South Africans and many businesses who have, over the past 2 weeks, sent donations, food, clothing, and other essentials to affected communities. It is now a week since a national state of disaster was declared to enable us to marshal the necessary capabilities and resources to respond to the destructive impact of these floods. This declaration enables the mobilization of more resources, more capabilities, as well as technical expertise in providing relief, recovery, and rehabilitation to affected communities. Our focus is on 3 provinces that were hardest hit. KwaZulu-Natal has suffered the most extensive damage. From the 8th to the 13th of April, the coastal parts of KwaZulu-Natal experienced extremely heavy rainfall. Many of you who either come from that province and reside in that province know exactly what disaster and devastation there was in that province. Severe damage in eThekwini Metro and the districts of King Cetshwayo, Ilembe, Ugu, and Umgungundlovu suffered the most. The eThekwini Metro received around 30% of its annual rainfall in one 24-hour period. Put differently, in just one day, the city received the equivalent of 110 days of rainfall. The resulting deluge led to the loss of at least 435 lives in the province At present, there are 54 people still missing or who are unaccounted for. Over 5,700 houses have been completely destroyed and nearly 10,000 houses have been partially damaged. Around 630 schools have been affected and over 100 schools are not accessible at present. Sadly, and perhaps this is the saddest part, 58 learners of various ages and one educator have passed away. 5 learners are still missing. Now that is the human tragedy that our people in KwaZulu-Natal have been subjected to. The economic damage is substantial, notably the Port of Durban, one of the continent's busiest ports. Supply of essential services have been disrupted, leaving homes, schools and businesses without water and electricity. In the Eastern Cape, the districts of Alfred Nzo, Chris Hani, Joe Gabi, and O.R. Tambo bore the brunt of the flooding. At least 2 people lost their lives in the flooding, 3 people were injured, and around 1,000 people were affected by the destruction of houses and other losses. I will be visiting the Eastern Cape in due course to go and assess the extent of the damage that has been suffered by our people there. As in KwaZulu-Natal, the flooding caused damage to roads and bridges and disrupted water and electricity in various areas as well. Similar damage was experienced in the Northwest Province, affecting the districts of Bujanala, Dr. Ruth Sikhomotsi Mumpati, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, and Ngaka Modiri Mulema. At least 1,535 houses have been affected by the damage to the various infrastructure and houses. By declaring a national state of disaster, the responsibility for coordinating and managing the disaster is that of national government, working closely with provincial governments and our municipalities. We are responding to this disaster in 3 overlapping phases. The first phase is focused on humanitarian assistance, on ensuring that all affected persons are safe and that their basic needs like food and water are met. Working with a number of organizations, and particularly non-governmental organizations, religious bodies, companies, and relief organizations, the different spheres of government have been providing the necessary assistance, such as meals, blankets, dignity packs, and other essentials to displaced individuals in shelters, in schools, and in community halls. And some of these, I must say, have not been adequate. And some of these have not provided the necessary dignity to our people. And it is for that reason that I have said our people must be moved with greater speed to temporary accommodation. Relief has also been provided in the form of social relief of distress grants to affected individuals, the supply of emergency water, provision of school uniforms, as well as assistance with funeral costs, to enable those who have lost their loved ones to bury them in dignity. Mobile classrooms are being deployed to damaged schools and repair work is underway to ensure a return to schooling in these areas as soon as possible. The second phase of our response is that of stabilization and recovery. This involves rehousing people who have lost their homes, and many of the people have lost everything, but also restoring provision of services. Cleanup campaigns are underway in all affected municipalities with participants in the Community Works program involved in many areas. Assistance is also being given by a number of our other agencies. The South African National Roads Agency has been working with national and provincial transport and provincial departments and affected municipalities to assess the damage to key routes and support the repair work that is currently underway. The Defence Force is also going to get deeply entrenched in this through their bridge building capabilities. Several roads have been reopened in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, and many bridges are being repaired as we speak. Extensive work has been done to restore the supply of water, particularly in eThekwini, and there are still a number of gaps that need to be closed. These areas that have been most affected are the ones that will be targeted, and bulk water infrastructure is also being attended to. Restoring water supply to all areas remains a significant challenge, however, and is vital if we are to safeguard the health and the well-being of all residents of these areas. Electricity has been restored in most areas of eThekwini and other affected municipalities, although there is still a high volume of faults that are being reported as we speak, and these need to be attended to. Providing accommodation for families that have lost their homes is a priority, especially with the winter months approaching. This involves, in the immediate term, the provision of temporary residential units and a voucher system for households to rebuild partially damaged houses. Work is also underway to identify suitable land parcels to build new houses for those who have been displaced. The province of KwaZulu-Natal has set up an online portal for businesses to report damages and is working with the National Department of Small Business Development to reprioritize resources to support small businesses that have been affected. The third phase, Madam Speaker, in our response is focused on reconstruction and building. Engineers have been deployed with several public and private entities and from a number of other provinces to assist with technical assessments of the damage to infrastructure and to advise on immediate and longer-term measures to repair and to rebuild. Access to the Port of Durban has been restored through temporary repairs to the Bayhead Area Road, and work is underway to return the road to its previous condition and possibly enlarge it into a 4-lane road. Honorable members, all the areas affected by the flooding will require significant commitment of resources to recover from this disaster. We will need to mobilize substantial funding within a fiscal environment that is severely constrained. We have to provide support to displaced households and rebuild roads, bridges, buildings, and other infrastructure, while at the same time sustaining expenditure measures in support of the reconstruction and recovery of our economy. We must respond to the impact of these catastrophic floods at a time when we are still counting the cost of COVID-19 pandemic and the July 2021 public unrest. Some of the funding needed to respond to this disaster is available in the existing budget of departments, provinces, and municipalities and our public entities. National Treasury is providing guidance to the relevant institutions on how they may reprioritize resources in their budgets, how they can access disaster response grants, and the requirements for the reallocation of conditional grant funds. Another source of funding is the contingency reserve for 2022-2023, which can be used for the repair and rebuilding of damaged infrastructure and other disaster recovery. It will, however, only become available once the 2022 Appropriation Act is enacted. The Solidarity Fund is also putting in place dedicated teams to assist with humanitarian and other forms of relief. As it did with COVID-19 response, the fund has established an account to receive donations from organizations, companies, and individuals. Government will make an initial amount of funds available to the Solidarity Fund, as I said, to enable it to undertake the necessary work. This is an important part of the broader effort to build social partnerships that draw on the best talents as well as the capabilities of both the public and private sectors. National Treasury is continuing to interact with various state institutions involved, including the National Disaster Management Center, to assess the extent of any additional funding required to respond to the disaster. It is clear, honorable members, that more money will be needed to deal with the reconstruction and rebuilding work that we must undertake. We have to ensure that all funds used to respond to this disaster are spent effectively. It is a great source of shame when this disaster struck. The most burning public debate was around fears that the resources allocated to respond to this disaster would be misappropriated or wasted. This shows us just how tired the people of South Africa have become of corruption. It is a stern reminder to all of government and businesses providing goods and services that the people of South Africa will not stand for acts of self-enrichment at the expense of those who have already lost. And that is why several measures are being taken to strengthen oversight and accountability. Working together with the National Treasury, the Auditor General will conduct real-time audits. Repeat, real-time audits on the emergency flood relief funds. This will provide independent assurance of whether public funds have been appropriately accounted for and were used for their intended purposes. These audits aim to prevent, to detect, and to report on the findings to ensure an immediate response to prevent leakage, potential fraud, as well as wastage. They will equip accounting officers and accounting authorities to act quickly on weaknesses in controls and prevent further losses. They will also enable immediate oversight as well as consequence management. National Treasury is also strengthening reporting requirements with respect to expenditure on disaster relief. To improve monitoring and ensure greater transparency, the details of all disaster-related procurement by public institutions will be published on the Treasury website to allow public scrutiny of these procurement transactions. These storms, honorable members, the resulting loss of life and the destruction of key infrastructure are a reminder that climate change remains the biggest single threat to the future of humanity. The South African Weather Service notes that extreme weather events are more prevalent in recent times across most regions of the country. The effects of climate change are already being widely felt and are expected to increase the severity over the next 20 years. These impacts are directly affecting people, they are affecting economies and the natural world. Our country has made significant progress in putting in place the architecture to reduce our carbon footprint and make our economy and society more climate resilient. In August of 2020, Cabinet approved the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. This strategy guides our efforts to build resilience and reduce vulnerability of communities to climate change. The adaptation strategy aims to ensure that climate resilience is factored into every aspect of government planning, from water use management to the construction of human settlements, from public transport to infrastructure, from disaster management to energy. As we rebuild from this disaster, we need to ensure that we are guided by the principles and approaches contained in the adaptation strategy. There is no shortage of heroes in our country, honorable members. We have seen it once again during this disaster. Amidst this crisis, we have seen acts of great heroism on the part of citizens, non-governmental organizations and community groups, as well as leaders. We commend and thank the many individuals and organizations that mobilize within hours to provide relief to those affected by the floods. I do want to single out, yes, the political leaders of our two provinces, Premier Zikalala, as well as Premier Mabuyane, for the work that they have done. Now, the nation owes a debt of gratitude to the South African Police Service, the South African National Defence Force, and other emergency personnel who have been undertaking risks and huge challenges through their search and rescue and recovery operations since the heavy rainfalls first struck parts of KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape. This includes rescue personnel from the Western Cape, the Free State, Northwest, Gauteng and Mpumalanga. And Limpopo. You must come, yes, you come from Limpopo, yes indeed. Yeah. I was really touched by the offers of support and help as they poured in when I was in KZN, being briefed by Premier Zikalala and his officials, as he got calls from the Premier of Limpopo, the Premier of Gauteng, the Premier of the Western Cape, that they are ready to come and assist. That truly touched me because that showed that as a nation, there is solidarity that we can rely on. And in this regard, for those who have really sacrificed, we remember and honor Sergeant Busisiwe Mjwaka, a police diver who died while conducting a search for victims in the Msunduzi River. Through their tireless efforts in dangerous conditions, these heroic South Africans have saved countless lives and kept many people from harm. They have also undertaken the difficult task of searching for missing persons who have been washed away by the rivers, by the floods rather, and have become enmeshed in the muds that have just washed them away. It is to these courageous women and men that the nation owes so much. Without them, the human cost of this disaster would have been far greater. We are grateful for the messages of support and pledges of solidarity that have been received from across the world, including from the African Union, the United Nations, and several heads of state. We thank those countries that have offered various forms of assistance as we respond to this disaster. The effects of this tragedy will be felt for a long time to come. The trauma of losing loved ones, homes, and businesses will take a long time to heal. Over the past few years, we have found ourselves at a crossroads many times. We have found ourselves feeling helpless and hopeless. Our nation's resilience has always been its shield, and our ability to unite in times of crisis has been our greatest strength. I want to call on this Parliament, with elected representatives of our people from different political parties, to work together to help the people of KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, Northwest, and yes, the people of this city as well, who have suffered greatly from the fires that enraged. Let us help them to rebuild their lives. Let us use this joint sitting to rally around those who have lost everything and to pledge them our full support. I do wish that we can prove that we can work together for the sake of the people and for the sake of our nation. This is the reason why I asked the presiding officers to call for this joint session. Let us live up to our sense and feeling of solidarity for the people of our country who've been affected by this. This is our hour. Let us help them.
I thank the Honorable President for your address. And order, members, may I plead with you to keep your masks on. This is a very small venue for our sitting, for the numbers which are in here, and there isn't enough cross-ventilation, as you can see. So we request that you keep your mask on, please. Thank you once more, Honorable President. I now invite the Honorable, the Deputy Chairperson of the Council of Provinces.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Goedemiddag. Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable President of the Republic of South Africa, the Deputy President, Deputy Speaker, House Chairpersons, our Chief Whip, members of Parliament, our two premiers from KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, Madam Speaker, allow me to, on behalf of Parliament, extend our sincere appreciation to be able to stand here and add our voice on the humanitarian crisis and devastation that have been caused by flooding and other disasters. The recent heavy rainfall and flooding has also been experienced in Eastern Cape Province, besides KwaZulu-Natal, as well as the Northwest, as has been reported here by our President. Let us also extend our heartfelt condolences to the families that have lost their loved ones. Our hearts sincerely go out to the affected communities during these difficult times who still have to deal with the physical, emotional, and psychological impact of this natural disaster. We want to further assure our people across the length and breadth of South Africa that Parliament has already activated its all-encompassing oversight machinery in order to respond to all pressing facets of this natural disaster. Honorable members, Tedros Ghebreyesus, the former Minister of Finance in Ethiopia, contextualizes the multifaceted nature of natural disasters when he stated, and I quote, "The specter of climate change threatens worsening natural disasters, rapid urbanization, forced migration, and economic hardship for the most vulnerable. Despite significant global advances and inability to effectively address epidemics and the health emergency still prevail and continuously threaten global health security and economic development. The effect of this natural disaster is indicative of the deepening and multifaceted developmental challenges that we continue to face as a country. The floods are threatening to deepen existing social and economic inequalities, with the poor sinking into deeper levels of general poverty and cyclical vulnerability. It is also worth noting that joblessness is at an all-time high in the country, with many, and I've close quote, President, with many being forced to do precarious work which does not provide long-term sustainability. Women and youth remain significantly vulnerable, with unemployment, particularly amongst those of working age, being mostly affected. We must therefore be mindful that we should not only be focusing on the provision of relief for those affected, we must equally activate economic recovery, growth and development response plans so as to provide sustainable solutions to the developmental regression that has impacted not only on the affected provinces, but the rest of the country. The natural disaster takes place against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, which in itself continues to cause far-reaching social and economic distress. As we strive forward as a nation to emerge from the throes of the economic inertia that has been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the state machinery broadly must continue to strive to give full effect to all economic recovery measures targeted at provinces, metros, districts, and localities. Mr. President, under your leadership, you have ushered in various reforms to respond to the developmental challenges that have been created by the COVID-19 pandemic, including various other pre-existing challenges. We now require an urgent activation of all forces, resources, and social compact to implement the grant plans already announced to ensure their effective implementation. This natural disaster once again urges a concentrated, unified, and integrated approach to respond decisively and speedily to the hardships faced by our people. As we grapple with the reality that our developmental agenda now faces significant resistance due to the onslaught of not only the pandemic, but also the looming natural disasters, we must also strengthen all efforts aimed at implementing relief measures to assist those affected by this natural disaster. We have reached a tipping point in our developmental era under the South African democracy, where we cannot simply congregate for an exercise of exchanging insults and apportioning blame. The current state of our economy, as exacerbated by various other external shocks known to all of us, demands a change in attitude and commitment so as to restore the promised dignity of living under the auspices of a democratic South Africa. Climate change has been a subject of decades of global scientific studies. Set up in 1988, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and its 2007 report reflects a firm consensus based on more robust findings that human-induced climate change is now unequivocal. It is already well underway and is occurring faster than expected. The flooding along the parts of the eastern coast serve to remind us to prioritize the disaster risk management, South Africa's Disaster Management Act, and the National Disaster Management Framework, which guides the implementation of the acts. These legislative instruments emphasize the importance of the integration and coordination of risk reduction across all spheres of government. The lack of access to insurance and social protection means that people in poverty are often forced to use their already limited assets to buffer disaster losses, which drive them into further poverty. Poverty is therefore both a cause and a consequence of disaster risk. We must also take into consideration the cyclical and generational nature of deeply entrenched poverty and inequality in South Africa, which begets that the children of the poor will give birth to a consecutive generation of poverty-stricken masters. I therefore want to concur with historian and author Nathaniel Philbrick when he states, and I quote, "In all natural disasters through time, man needs to attach meaning to tragedy, no matter how random and inexplicable the event is." Moving forward, in dealing with the devastation caused by the catastrophic flooding, we need to embark on joint integrated planning, which will enhance the power and functions of our institutions, which include the ability to work in a cooperative manner, so that there is greater cohesion and a positive impact in the lives of our people. We must continue to strengthen the district development model, which is an operational model for improving cooperative governance aimed at building a capable, ethical developmental state. As Parliament, we have taken a decision to establish an ad hoc joint committee on flood disaster relief and recovery, among other things, to ensure a coordinated oversight approach and oversee the response and implementation of the relief measures by government. We will also provide the mechanisms and platforms for communities to voice both positive feedback and criticism to those providing humanitarian assistance, and for them to receive the appropriate redress for issues raised.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really not used to that. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Thank you very much, Honourable President.
I now invite the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, KZN Premier can help you with water. He knows a good supplier. Madam Speaker, Mr. President, honourable members, the devastating flood in KwaZulu-Natal has brought immense misery to a part of the country that was already reeling and battling to recover from the violent riots of last year and the looting. We hold those affected communities in our hearts and in our prayers, and we extend our deepest condolences to all of those who lost loved ones, family, friends, and colleagues. We can rebuild homes and streets and bridges, but we cannot bring back the 435 South Africans who've perished in this disaster. Our priority now must lie in bringing humanitarian relief to stricken communities and to reconnect them as quickly as possible to water, electricity, and sanitation infrastructure. It's been over 2 weeks now, and there are still far too many communities that still are living without water and without electricity. In many areas, there are still no signs of the promised water tankers which very easily could have been brought in from other provinces to assist. Mr. President, if widespread access to clean water is not restored quickly, we are going to see the outbreak of a second disaster in the form of deadly disease. The urgency of restoring these services, and particularly clean drinking, cooking and cleaning water, cannot be overstated. But somebody needs to drive this, and therein lies the problem. Mr. President, you clearly knew that your provincial government in KwaZulu-Natal nor your local government in eThekwini was set up with the task of dealing with this disaster, which is why you declared a national state of disaster. Indeed, the eThekwini Executive Committee has only met twice, and the full council inexplicably is yet to meet. The mayor of eThekwini has been entirely absent during this past 2 weeks, and the Premier's contribution was to hijack a water tanker for his personal use. Mr. President, you were right not to trust them. In your televised address, straight after the flood, you said that the primary responsibility was to coordinate and manage the disaster had been assigned to a national government. Pedestrian is your response to disasters. In theory, this would lift the responsibility away from local government and provincial government and allow your government to manage the rescue efforts and recovery efforts centrally. But I say in theory, because in the real world, this is not what's happening on the ground at all. In the real world, no one is actually managing this process. Everyone has simply run away from the problem, and desperate residents have been left once again to fend for themselves.
Order, man, order.
City officials have switched off their phones, the mayor's gone AWOL, your councillors are telling panicked residents to F off on WhatsApp, the Premier grabs a water tanker for himself, council staff are stealing the care packages meant for the rescuers, and when the ministers finally arrive, they commandeer helicopters and choppers for vanity flybys that should have been used to rescue individuals. And amid all this, our councillors are trying their best to assist frustrated communities, and they're having to bear the brunt of these frustrations because they're simply the only people that are there. So despite your best assurances on television and in this House, there is no coordinated national response at all. Your government, I'm afraid, Mr. President, is absent. By declaring a state of national disaster and then not stepping in with a nationally coordinated response has created now a dangerous leadership vacuum in a time of great crisis. And as we saw in the riots last year, when leadership is absent, lawlessness and chaos start to reign. And already one city official has been killed at a water tanker filling depot. We dare not let this become a deadly repeat of the July riots last year. Mr. President, you said in your address, and I quote, that this situation called for a massive and urgent relief effort. But 2 weeks later, there's no sign of this effort. If a disaster management plan exists, no one has seen it. If there's a disaster management centre, and it's better than your 30% that you got, if there's a disaster management centre as mandated by the Disaster Management Act, where all the various response services are brought together into one location, no one has seen it. If leaders from national government have been assigned there to deal with the crisis, they must be operating by stealth because no one has seen or heard them. And we've seen so many times the promises on corruption that you make in speeches bear little reality with what happens on the ground, which is why that the motion passed by this House this morning to establish an ad hoc committee is important. Oversight must be exercised because we've seen what happens to your government when there's no exercise of authority from this House. If we may offer you some advice, and you've asked everybody to pitch in, taken from our own experience of managing the drought disaster in the Western Cape, it's simply this: be present, be clear, and be honest. Let the people know there that you're in charge, let them know exactly what the plan is, and update them about this plan regularly. Don't promise 10,000 soldiers if you're only going to send 500. Don't guarantee that relief aid won't be stolen when you know that your party has a looting problem. Don't describe your relief effort as massive and urgent if it's anything but. We need to have a live dashboard to share real-time information on dam levels and water usage. And you need to be able to communicate the repair of infrastructure to people. People need to know who is in charge of coordinating government's disaster response. So tell them. Tell them the details of the plan. Who is in charge of humanitarian relief? Who is in charge of the next phase? The Stabilization and Recovery. This needs to be a clear and published and publicly available plan. Tell them where they can report their issues. Give them the assurance that these will be acted upon. You're dealing with people, Mr. President, who have been through a terrible ordeal. They are extremely vulnerable. They need reassurance, and they need to know that they can trust you. Be present, be clear, and be honest. You cannot disappear in a crisis. Thank you.
I now invite the Honorable H.O. Mukalipi.
Honorable Speaker, we stand here deeply saddened by the loss of so many lives caused by the heavy rains and flooding in KwaZulu-Natal. We send our heartfelt condolences to the families and friends who lost their loved ones during these difficult times in KZN. Even to this day, some family members are still missing, and their families are helpless, frustrated, and have lost hope that they will ever get to see them again, or even get a chance to bury them. Some of the stories are deeply disturbing, Honorable Speaker, such as the story of Ms. Nonhlanhla Mazeka of Ward 53 eMawoti, okuthe uma kuqala izimvula. In the middle of the night, on 11 April 2022, she went to the neighbors, eyoboleka ipiki ukuze avule umsele wamanzi emva kwendlu yakhe. While she was still at neighbors, the house with 3 members of her family was washed away. While 3 of her family members were found injured, her 15-year-old daughter, uAmahle Mazeka, is still missing, with no hope that she'll be found. The same goes for Nkosi family in Ward 57, whose daughter Untombenhle Nkosi was a grade 9 student of Amandletu Secondary School, got swept away by floods and has not been found to this day. Umndeni wakabuthelezi eWard 59 eMawutani, Honorable Speaker, wona ke ulahlekelwe amalunga amathathu omndeni, ugogo, umama, ingane. Abakwazanga ke ukuthi ba-afforde ifuneral yamalunga omndeni as umndeni. Kwasiza omakhelwane ukuthi bahlanganise ukuze amalunga amathathu omndeni angcwabeke. Lokho kwenzeka after eThekwini municipality have announced ukuthi those who need intervention of 15,000 rand will be available to assist families who can't afford to bury their loved ones with dignity. That was not the case with this family. Let alone the ward councillor Mhlongo of Ward 59 was told to go and check the family and assist the family. Unfortunately, it didn't happen with the Buthelezi family. These floods are the earliest signs of the trouble that awaits humanity if we fail to act now to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We have been forewarned that the careless type of nature exploiting development that humanity has embarked on over hundreds of years went over and above what the natural system could accommodate. Southern Africa and Africa at large is paying for the sins committed by the global north, which has been burning fossil fuels without care for generations. The development they pride themselves of has laid the ground for the destruction of humanity. The heavy rains in KZN and in the Eastern Cape are as a result of climate change, and we as a country have not planned sufficiently enough to deal with impacts of climate change. Our municipalities are poorly equipped, the drainage systems are not working, the ability to respond and help people in times of natural disasters such as these ones is almost non-existent. The poor workmanship of public infrastructure, such as roads and bridges, is going to cause more discord for people as incidents like this happen. The poor quality of houses that our people are forced to stay in contributed to the massive death toll in KZN, Mr. President. Poor people are going to feel the pain of climate change far more than the rich, and the government must pay specific attention to ensuring that the construction of public infrastructure is not done by clueless people who get given tenders simply because they are the ANC members. This disaster also calls for a strengthened government able to respond to social disasters without stealing from the poor. The monies that will be made available to deal with the disaster must be fully accounted for, and they must be utilized to fully authorize state institutions. We cannot hand over the functions of government to unelected people. The state, together with the citizens of KZN, must lead the rebuilding to that province, and anyone who is found to be stealing from the citizens must be arrested. We as the EFF, we will be on the ground, Honorable Speaker, as we have always been. Work together with our people and they try to build their lives. We thank the religious communities who have made spaces available to accommodate the destitute. We wish the people of KZN strength during these difficult times. I thank you.
And thank you, Honorable Member. I now invite Ubaba Ushenge, Honorable MG Buthelezi.
Honorable Speaker of the Assembly, thank you. Your Excellency, our President, and Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, His Excellency, the Deputy President, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Deputy Ministers, and Honorable Members of the Assembly. On Sunday morning, Madam Speaker, Princess Lindy Johnson, laid to rest her daughter, Princess Monaghan, and 4 of her grandchildren. We as a who said, who enemy, who Akile, and Zekete. And all 5 were lost when their house collapsed under unrelated floods in Hammersmith. This unspeakable tragedy is one among many that have brought us to our knees again. Honorable Madam Speaker, families throughout because of Natal and in the Eastern Cape and Northwest are mourning the loss of loved ones, some of whom are yet to be found, as has been said repeatedly in this assembly. Homes have been destroyed, and entire communities are living in school halls and church halls, trying to make sense of the love, which is utterly changed. I wish to put on record, Madam Speaker, Your Excellency, my appreciation of the mutual feelings of His Majesty King, Mr. Zulu, and Your Excellency on the decision that has been made to postpone the date of the installation of coronation of our King in these very dire circumstances. On behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, I express my deepest condolences to all that our people have lost their loved ones. We will be picking up the pieces clearly for a very long time to come. As you have stated, Your Excellency, while sinkholes maintain the threat of further infrastructure damage, already the task of rebuilding roads, bridges, and buildings is enormous. Yet the damage goes well beyond infrastructure. Countless rural families survive through subsistence farming, and the entire season of crops has been destroyed and livestock lost. The threat of hunger looms hard. So too does the threat of the sparking COVID cases and other industries as we battle to restore water supply, electricity, even in central business districts, as we have indicated, Your Excellency. Under these dire circumstances, we thank Your Excellency, the President of the Republic, for declaring a state of disaster. The economic burden of these floods comes as we are still recovering from the July 2021 civil unrest in KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal has been hit again and again with hardship. You cannot imagine what further distress our people can endure. I wish to praise His Majesty King Zulu, who has led millions of South Africans through an exceptionally painful time since the passing of his father. And I think, as I've indicated, His Majesty showed great compassion in asking that his coronation be postponed so that we might focus our attention on the rebuilding. I also applaud the leadership of my party, who daily, ever since this happened, on a daily basis, our leadership, including members of parliament, members of the legislatures, including councillors, including mayors, have been mobilizing support and assistance so swiftly in all the communities that are in distress. The IF's President, the Honorable Stabilization and all our leaders have been working tirelessly, organizing relief and rescue food, shelter, clothing and blankets, and so has leaders of other political parties. The work of rebuilding broken lives and damaged infrastructure will largely be done through the local government, and I'm proud of how IF-led municipalities have responded. I'm proud still of the beautiful spirit of solidarity in our people. We have seen neighbors and strangers assisting one another in recognition of our shared humanity. It is thus painful, yet entirely understandable, that South Africans are already pleading with us to protect the resources for disaster relief. There is a very real fear that these funds will be plundered long before they reach distressed families. I therefore call on government officials and leaders to search their consciences. There is no peace for those who steal from our people. Disaster can strike at any time. Make sure that your hands are clean. Now, as we face that devastating loss, may God Almighty heal our nation. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you. Siyabulela, Baba. I now invite the Honorable P.J. Groenewald.
Geachte Speaker, deur u die agbare president. Agbare president is reg. Ons moet bid. Maar ons moet nie net bid wanneer daar 'n ramp plaasgevind het nie. Suid-Afrika het elke dag gebed nodig. Want ons kan nie môre, as alles weer goed gaan, en sê, Here, staan nou eers bietjie een kant. Ons wil nou eers kyk wat gesteel kan word en wat geplunder kan word nie. Ons moet elke dag bid. Honorable Speaker, you're quite right. The people of South Africa are asking the questions, what about the corruption and the billions that's going to be availed for this disaster? You yourself said that the ANC is the accused number one as far as corruption is concerned. Honorable President, the ANC is still accused number one. It is the words you've used in 2019 with the funds. You also said that you will ensure that the money appropriated and allocated will be used for that purpose. And you said that the Treasury and the Auditor General will see that it happens. Now you say it again. The only difference now is real-time audits. Now, Honourable President, please, don't let us wait for an annual report from the Auditor General. Let us also get real-time reports on what is happening. Further on that, Honourable President, is that we already heard about the corruption taking place at this time, as we speak. I can assure you that there are certain hyenas and vultures waiting at the gates for the funds and the gates to be open so that they can loot. Honourable President, I appeal to you that it is not only about funds that is available now, but also for the future, as specifically as far as infrastructure is concerned. And I appeal to you that those contracts must be publicized and be open for public scrutiny. Honourable President, we must also be honest. The flood in KZN is not only a natural-made flood, it's also a man-made disaster. In this sense, that there was not proper planning. And as far back as 2019, for instance, the Chamber for Commerce and Industry already appealed in that disaster to the eThekwini municipality to look at the infrastructure which they did not properly did. Finally, Honourable Chairperson, my time is catching up. Ons vind nou eers uit wat was die waarde van die kommandostelsel wat in 2007 afgeskaf is. Die kommandostelsel was mense en die lede was van die gemeenskap wat onmiddellik kon opgetree het, wat die omgewing ken. Maar ons het nie meer daardie stelsel nie. And therefore I will appeal also to the President to seriously let the Honourable Minister, for instance, Defence, look at a system of a home guard. This is not going to be the last disaster we're going to have. It's the future ones that will also have to be looked after. Lastly, Honourable President, we have these disasters, but I want to emphasize the biggest disaster South Africa has at this moment is the fact that we have an ANC government that is incompetent to prevent corruption. I thank you.
I thank you, Honourable Member. I now invite the Honourable N.S. Swart to take the floor.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable President, on behalf of Reverend Meshwe, the ACDP would like to express its heartfelt condolences to all the families who have lost loved ones during these recent floods. We also pray for a speedy recovery of all those who were injured, and we join all those that are praying today, Honourable President. And it is significant, Honourable President, I would plead with you also to bring in the faith-based organizations. Not only are they praying, but they're also effective in action, for we know that faith without action is worthless. And they are there to assist at this time, not only with much needed pastoral care and spiritual care, but also practically on the ground. Just think if every church, if every imam, or if every mosque or every synagogue could be motivated to work together to help at this desperate time. Honourable President, you have correctly pointed out that the people in KwaZulu-Natal have had to face a lot in these last 2 years. First the COVID-19 pandemic, then last year's rioting and looting, and now these devastating floods and fires that have literally washed their lives and livelihoods away. Humanitarian is desperate. Water, electricity, sanitation is desperate. And it would, Honourable President, I feel so deeply about the humanitarian crisis, but it would, as so many other speakers have indicated, be truly tragic if those who have suffered so much were again to fall victim to corruption and incompetence from those officials meant to help them in this desperate hour of need. And so we share the concerns that you've expressed, that so many other people have expressed, about the billions of rands of funds that need to be properly spent. The concept of servant leadership, Honourable President, and the concept of stewardship, rentmeesterskap, of state assets and state funds, that they must be properly spent for the best of the citizens. And so from my justice background, I welcome, and finance background, I welcome the real-time audits of spending that are to be announced. This we welcome. I also welcome the fact that the procurements will be made public for accountability. That is a very positive aspect. And President, we need to urge citizens and officials to blow the whistle on corrupt and illegal procurement processes. Indeed, it's incumbent upon any person who holds a position of authority in both the public and, remember, the private spheres to report corrupt activities where more than 100,000 rand is involved. Section 34 of the Prevention of Combating of Activities Act. So let us take a united stand at this time in our nation. Let us stand together at this great, desperate humanitarian crisis. Let us stand together and say, Panzi corruption and looting. Panzi, Pambil, South Africa, Pambil. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable NLS Kwangwa.
Pambili, not Pambil, Pambili.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable President, on behalf of the United Democratic Movement, let me take this opportunity to extend our deepest condolences and sympathies to all the people that have lost their loved ones during the devastating floods that hit parts of KwaZulu-Natal, rather the KwaZulu-Natal and parts of the Eastern Cape recently. President, due to this disaster, our people, as we've already indicated, have experienced extreme losses that are going to impact their lives for a long time to come. It is indeed therefore important and vital for government as a whole to intervene and play its part in ensuring that the affected persons are safe and that at the very least in the short to medium term, their basic needs are indeed met. However, President, I'm sure you'll agree with us or understand that most of us take some of the commitments you've made with a pinch of salt because of the incidents that happened in the recent past with COVID-19, resources that were allocated to help our people who ended up in the pockets of greedy comrades. Our worry is that the important work you have outlined here earlier will still be carried out to a large extent by the same officials and the same politicians who are not known for parsimonious living habits, who want to use this opportunity and this strategy to profit. We are saying, President, we welcome, for instance, one of the measures you've made, you are going to put in place where online audits, real-time audits rather, are going to be an order of the day. But it is important that during the tender processes, as we follow them, that we ensure that tenders are awarded to highly skilled and deserving companies. If there's anything the recent floods have taught us about infrastructure, is that tenders must be given to companies with experienced engineers to minimize chances of crumbled bridges and roads swallowing vehicles in cases of heavy rains. It is also important that those who misappropriate public funds must be held to account. We want to also call on the private sector to say, if you recall in 2017, when there were fire in Knysna, the private sector in a very short period of time donated more than 30 million rands. But whenever there are fires in informal settlements and KZN, we are talking about, for example, Standard Bank, I'm sure you had 2 million rands, they donated 10 million rands during the Knysna saga. If you were to consider ABSA, 10 million rands I accept, but there were also other companies, private sector, Pick and Pays and others that donated, they came to the party, now the whole province is affected. But it seems like people aren't moved by it. I wanted to quote from Maya Angelou, but my time has run out, Speaker, I see. I wanted to quote from Maya Angelou. When I think of death by Maya Angelou, says, I can accept the idea of my own demise, but I'm unable to accept the death of anyone else. I find it impossible to let a friend or relative to go to that country of no return. Disbelief becomes my close companion and anger follows in its wake. She says, I answer the heroic question, death, where is thy sting? Because it is here in our hearts, minds, and memories that they exist for eternity. Quoting another Maya Angelou poem, she says, they existed, we can be and be better, for they existed. May their souls rest in peace.
Thank you, Honorable Kwankwa. Honorable S.A. Lutuli. Honorable S.A. Lutuli.
Ngibingelele ku Commander in Chief Julius Malema nobuholi bonke be-EFF nababukeli emakhaya. Economic Freedom Fighter iyaqhubeka nokudlulisela amazwi enduduzo emindenini nabangani kulabo abalahlekelwe izihlobo nabathandiweyo babo kulezi zimvula ebezizikhukhula ezenzeke endaweni yaKwaZulu-Natal. Through our various visits to the province, we have witnessed for ourselves the extent of the damage and destruction caused by the floods, and we urge those in government to step up support for the affected communities. Sikhuluma kuyimanje abantu bethu bambondelene emahholo emphakathi kanye nasemasontweni lapho bebalisa ngezinto abayilahlekelwe kanye nemphefumulo kulezi zikhukhula ezenzekile kanye nokubhidlikelwa imizi yabo namakhaya abo. Kuyimanje balanganiselwe emakhulwini amane kanye nama-50 abalahlekelwe izimpilo, abalimele baningi kakhulu, labo abangakatholakali isibalo sabasaziwa. The floods has interrupted the day-to-day functioning in KwaZulu-Natal, while more than 13,000 households affected, 5.6 billion rands of roads infrastructure destroyed, about 4,000 houses and more than 550 schools destroyed, and the environment has been hampered, with large parts of regions having suffered soil erosions and damage to crops. This is all against the backdrop of the province, which less than a year ago experienced a week of violence and looting, which left hundreds of people dead and businesses in brink of collapse. Chairperson, this disaster is far from over. Inhlalakahle zabantu bakaZulu-Natal ziphazamisekile futhi kusazothatha isikhathi eside ukuba baphole. Asikho isikhathi okumele sichithwe ukwazisa ngokusheshsha isombululo kubantu bakaZulu-Natal. Kepha lo hulumeni weqembu libusayo usazothatha achithe isikhathi njengoba ehlezi eza. Abantu bakaZulu-Natal badinga ukudla. Abantu bakaZulu-Natal badinga amanzi. Badinga indawo zokukhosela. Badinga umhlaba and bawudinga manje umhlaba. Si-EFF sinikele ngenani elingaphezulu ka500,000 kulabo abahlukumezekile lezikhukhula endaweni yaseThekwini. Saphinde sanikela ngokudla emizini engaphezulu ka500. Saphinde sanikela ngoblankets emizini engaphezulu ka500. Sanikela ngeipontshi zokulala emizini engaphezulu ka250. Sibonga our Commander in Chief Julius Malema ngomusa nothando alikhombisa abantu bakaZulu-Natal kulesi sikhathi. Yize sikuqonda ukuthi
Order, honorable members.
Yize sikuqonda ukuthi lo hulumeni awukwazi ukuvimba izibhicongo zezimvula ezinamandla ezenze ukuba kube khona izikhukhula, kepha ungakwazi ukugwema izinto ezenziwa ngamabomu ezifana nokungabi khona kohlelo lokugeleza kwamanzi, imigwaqo emimbi namabhuloho angekho esimweni. Those in government must find ways to prevent floods from occurring. Warning system must be set up so people have enough time to save themselves and positions in case of natural disasters. Abantu bakithi kumele bakhelwe izindlu ezisisimeni ezizokwazi ukwamukela nokumelana nezimo ezimbi zemvula ezinamandla. Akuyeke ukusetshenziswa izinto zokwakhiwa ezishibhile ukwakha izindlu. Uhlelo lokugeleza kwamanzi kumele kuthuthukiswe ukulekelela ukumamatha nokumelana namanzi amaningi asukegeleza. Quality roads and bridges must be built which will sustain all weather conditions. The consequence of floods must be known and steps must be taken to prevent it. We urge the ruling party to look to the other other advanced countries which experience heavy rainfalls throughout the year, but yet never experience floods. Sihlalo singiqeda sithanda ukubonga wonke ama-ground forces, ama-fighters, nawo zonke ezinye iy'nhlaka zomphakathi ey'kwazile ukusiza abantu baseThekwini, abantu baseLembe, abantu basogwini, abantu baseKingcetshwayo, kanye nabantu baseMgungundlovu abahlukumezekile ngenxa yalezi zigebengu. Let us continue with our efforts to provide aid, for the recovery phase is upon us and is often the most difficult phase of the disaster. Ngiyabonga.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Honorable, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal.
Sir. Honorable Speaker, Honorable President, Honorable President, Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Honorable President, I would like to respect your instruction that we should all pledge solidarity with the people and not use this platform for grandstanding. But I feel compelled to just clarify some few issues. Firstly, while we have made the public statement about the spat in Lamesi, the fact is that in Lamesi, I've been supporting that community for more than a year, including organizing water. Post that incident, I have provided them with 4 static tankers. But more than that, why I should do that? There is a councillor, but the councillor is missing in action. Councillor Pulani from DA. What I've said is, the leader of the opposition, one of the things we must do, we must stop discrimination. The leader of the opposition in this house come to the very same ward, Ward 58. He chose to go to upmarket area, Umdloti, and ignore the people of Lamesi. Worse of that, he does not visit those people who were in halls where they are accommodated.
Point of order.
On behalf of the people of KwaZulu-Natal, we wish to convey our gratitude to South Africans from all walks
Premier,
of life.
order, take your seat. Please, Honorable Member, point of order.
All right. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The leader of the opposition has used an offensive
Order, man.
has used an unparliamentary language by claiming that the Premier is lying. So I think
We
they must
didn't
be
hear.
going around that.
You only heard alone.
Will you please withdraw that?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
It's unparliamentary and you
Madam
know
Speaker,
that.
he is lying, and that is the truth. I went to Inanda and to Tongaat, and the news reports are there for anyone to see. The Premier is lying.
Honorable Member, Honorable Member, you said you are a liar, and I'm saying withdraw that. With all due respect to you.
Madam Speaker, the Premier is not telling the truth.
Withdraw.
I withdraw, but this man who steals water is not telling the truth.
Thank you very much,
Point of
Honorable.
order.
Thank you, Honorable.
Khatebe.
Honorable Speaker.
Khatebe.
Honorable Speaker.
Yes.
The leader of the opposition has used another offensive language in the House by saying that the Premier has stolen something. I think it's offensive language.
Honorable, hi, Honorable Steenhuisen, you are a leader. Hold on, Honorable Mazon. Honorable Mazon. Yes, yes, point of order.
Honourable Speaker, it is a point of fact that doesn't require any motion that the Premier himself went on SABC radio and himself...
Honorable Mazon, you said it's a point of order.
...his own accommodation.
Take your seat.
And that means that he's
Take your seat,
admitted
please.
to stealing water.
Take your seat. You are making a speech. There's no point of order. Honorable members, no man, I said leave, no, honorable member, no, come on, honorable member, honorable Cele.
Lying on what?
Honorable Speaker, I don't know what this point, but people died. Honorable Speaker.
Yes.
Can we come back to the
Yes.
senses of this House and talk about the issue at hand?
Thank
Please,
you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Please.
Honorable Cele. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Premier, will you
Thank
please
you,
take the
Honorable
floor?
Speaker.
Sorry.
As the people of KwaZulu-Natal...
Speaker, on a point of order.
Honorable Papo.
Speaker.
Honorable Papo.
Speaker, even if there is an issue around disagreement, but in the rules there's what is called unparliamentary language.
Yes.
You have made a ruling, the leader of the opposition refuses to accept your ruling. And I don't think we can continue when a member of this House refuses a ruling from a presiding officer, worse from a leader of opposition. I don't think it's correct. He must actually withdraw, and if he has a problem with what the Premier has said, there are procedures to raise those matters in this House.
Honorable Papo, thank you very much. I will rule on the matter at the end of the proceedings. Honorable members, we are messing up a very, very good debate.
I said
This
40.
Please just lower your hand. Lower your hand. Lower your
I
hand.
said so I can apologize.
Honorable members, you are behaving like young ones now. We are adults and we are leaders.
No, I-
Please stop it.
Stop.
Yes, stop it. Honorable member, I said stop it. Now, order, yes. What is the order?
Thanks, Speaker. While we were sitting here, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal engaged the Honourable Cuthbert and lip-synced and told him to F off. And that is not parliamentary.
Okay. Stand up.
Amanga Alfaz.
Honorable Zikalala. Honorable members, I don't know, is there
No,
something
thanks.
wrong with the mic today? Honorable Premier, Honorable Premier, did you use that language
What language?
of 4 words? You did not.
No, let me clarify. If I use it, I was going to be humble enough and apologize. I didn't. I said to him, he was saying to me, I'm a liar. And it 40 now.
Okay.
I'm sorry if no, I didn't.
Thank you,
No.
Honorable Member. Honorable Mkachwa. Honorable Mkachwa.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Order.
Thank you very much, Speaker.
Order, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Since we are on the trend of indicating what people lip sync, I'd like to indicate that the Member of Parliament who just stood up to raise a complaint on Honorable Zikalala himself continuously I don't know whatever is, to the Chief Whip of the Majority Party that she must shut up on a number of occasions. Can the Speaker's office please look into that? Thank you very much.
Okay, honorable members, may I make an appeal to all of you? Honorable members, Honorable Steenhuisen and Honorable Chief Whip, I don't know what is it about the two of you here. Please. Honorable Honorable members, I'm just making a plea to all of you. Please let us respect the House. Please let us allow for members to make their statements following the statement of the President. And you can continue with this debate outside of the chamber. I plead with you. I really plead with you. Will you please conduct yourselves as leaders and like adults? Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you. Please continue, Premier.
Thank you. As people of KwaZulu-Natal, we wish to convey our gratitude to all South Africans from all walks of life and across the world for their support to the victims of floods. As KwaZulu-Natal, we also wish to express our solidarity with our sister province, the Eastern Cape, which also suffered devastating floods, stealing precious lives, destroying homes, damaging infrastructure, disrupting services, and bringing untold pain to various communities. We stand here shouldering the pain of families who have lost 435 lives, suffered destruction of more than 630 schools, with not less than 6,793 people who have been left homeless. About 53 people are still missing. Notwithstanding such difficulties, despair is not our choice, for we are determined to build a prosperous society where the whole of humanity will live safely and be protected. Guided by the three-phase intervention approach, which was announced by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, we are working to ensure that we implement the intervention. We can confirm that the great work in the execution of phase 1 is proceeding, as almost all affected families are being assisted, provided with humanitarian support. We wish to single out the KZN-based Gift of the Givers, Rivers Church, Hillgrove Hindu Temples, Revival and Mission Center, the Catholic Church, Salvation Army, the Covenant Fellowship Church International, and many others that are providing support. The provincial government and the eThekwini municipality, AFBOP, and Mutsepe Family Foundation are working together to provide dignified funerals to the perished citizens of the province. We have taken note of what Honorable Mkalipi raised, and we would like to follow up on that issue even outside of this. The second phase, which was presented by the President as the phase focusing on recovery, rehousing, and restoration of services, is ongoing. On the 22nd of April, the Department of Human Settlement commenced with the construction of temporary residential units in areas where there are people housed in community facilities and in areas where people have sought shelters with their relatives. The Department of Public Enterprise, Trade, Industry and Competition, working together with the Provincial Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, are working with Transnet to repair the damage in the Bayhead at Durban Port. Due to the closure of M4 and R102, which is between Durban and Kwaduguza, the Department of Transport has conceded to the request to waive the toll-free at Tongat and Umvoti Plaza, as there are currently no alternative routes in these two areas. We wish to thank the national government for these efforts. While there have been many concerns about the performance of government departments and municipalities, the reconstruction of the bridge and speedy restoration of other services, including the bridge linking Umlazi and the Durban South Highway, which was reconstructed in a period of less than 5 days by eThekwini municipality need to be uploaded. Your Excellency, Mr. President, the work has begun to quantify the damage caused by the floods. This is important toward the implementation of phase 3 outlined by the President, which is rehabilitation and construction of the province, which should begin to work toward normalizing all services. We pledge to ensure that what we have seen before, where it takes prolonged period to repair damaged infrastructure, which would have been damaged by storm, is not happening again. And we would want to ensure that we expedite the interventions. We commit that in all interventions that will be done by the provincial government, we will ensure that we are corrupt-free and ensure that all contracts are pre-audited. We will also, through the legislature, submit to the process of the oversight which have been adopted by the KZN legislature. I wish to join the President in thanking various members who have supported us during this difficult time. We need to mention the leadership played by His Majesty Isilo Misuzulu Kazwelithini during this time. But we also want to thank all traditional leaders, faith-based communities, members of diplomatic corps, the business sector in the province who have provided support to all of us during this difficult time. As the province, we continue to embrace and work hard on adopting and executing mitigating factors against climate change. We are part of the Under 2 Coalition, which is the global network advocating for carbon emission toward net zero by 2050. We shall continue using this platform to learn and mobilize more support toward climate change programs. We're determined to intensify our work on mitigating climate change, including budget and mainstreaming, research, community awareness and education, as well as building the resilient infrastructure. We feel also the burden lighter because of the support from all sectors of the society. While members of the media went to tell stories as part of their duty, but they equally created an awareness and mobilized the South African citizenry to pledge support with the victims of the floods. And for that, we wish also to register our grateful and thank the work done by members of the media. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Premier. We will now proceed to the next speaker, Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chairperson. As the ATM, we want to express our deepest condolences to the families who have lost their loved ones as a result of heavy rains that caused devastating floods across the country. All the efforts to gain control of the situation, including finding the missing persons, are commendable. The ATM has also noted the budgetary allocations and hopes that that the oversight role of Parliament will include both proactive and reactive measures. The ATM is, however, concerned that there seems to be serious inadequacy in the diagnosing of the situation, such that with the current superficial diagnosis, a threat of the same tragedy cannot be dismissed. Therefore, the ATM is making the following 10-point recommendations. 1, the notion that this disaster is an act of God must be dismissed as a convenient excuse to avoid accountability. An inquiry to whether this was not as a result of cloud seeding gone wrong must be conducted so that the problem can be properly isolated. It is common cause that the technology of today is advanced such that the condensation of clouds can be artificially assisted. All geoscience faculties across the country must work together and advise municipalities in terms of the topography, in particularly the natural drainage system, floodplains, the physical and chemical properties of certain sediments. Town planners must work much more with geoscientists so that the laying of bulk infrastructure is underpinned on and informed by geological setting of that particular area. The ATM strongly suggests that the entire country must be geologically rezoned so that all floodplains are declared unfit for residential and business purposes, possibly with the exception of certain agricultural products that thrive in such environments. All wetlands and estuaries must be protected. Vegetation in sloping areas must be protected by law. People living on the floodplains along riverbanks must be relocated in elevated areas, and whoever is landowner must be dealt with in terms of the spirit of the Constitution when it comes to restitution. As part of employment creation, all areas deemed unfit for human settlement must be guarded by people in the employ of municipalities on a 24-hour basis to avoid the rampant increase of informal settlement in dangerous areas. National Treasury must make special allocation for all municipalities that do not have rates and tax bases to afford employment of these guards. And lastly, all public representatives must be put through a workshop of basic geoscience training so that the oversight role is more meaningful. On behalf of the ATM, we want to repeat that we want to express our deepest condolences to each and every family that have lost their loved one. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Detroit.
Agbare voorsitter, when you are barely surviving, you can't dream. How many dreams have been shattered as a result of the ANC's incompetence, stubbornness, and blatant disregard for the value of life and rule of law? How many dreams have been shattered by the failure to act in the best interest of communities, provinces, and the country? How many dreams of so many children, Mr. President, were shattered when the ANC government allowed schools in KwaZulu-Natal and across the country to be vandalized during the COVID period, as well as during the July unrest that took place? Millions of rands are lost. A result of the recent floods and failures of the ANC, Mr. President, failing infrastructure, more than 600 schools in KZN were damaged, affecting about 270,000 learners. In 2021, UNICEF indicated that learners lost about 75% of their school year as a result of the lockdown. What now? What about those children's dreams? How many more dreams will be shattered by this Grim Reaper clothed in black, green and gold? Chair, voorsitter, die president het in sy staatsrede aangekondig dat hy en die kabinet volle verantwoordelikheid aanvaar vir die onrus wat in Julie 2021 plaasgevind het, insluitend die 342 persone wat dood is. 'n Uitstappie wat Suid-Afrika meer as 50 miljard rand gekos het en meer as 2 miljoen werksverliese tot gevolg gehad het. Sal die president en die kabinet dan nou die premier, die LER, munisipale bestuurders, ANC raadslede ook verantwoordbaar hou en verantwoordelik hou vir die persone wat hulle lewens afgelê het en gesterf het in die onlangse vloede, weens die feit dat hulle nie opgetree het en toegesien het dat infrastruktuur bo die vloedlyne gebou word nie. Hulle het nie teengestaan dat onwettige nedersettings onder hierdie vloedlyne geplaas is nie. Wie sal pas staan vir hierdie 435 oopgrafte, meneer die president? Wie? Daar is om politieke redes, gewilligheid, ideologiese drome, opsetlik toegelaat dat munisipale regulasies en wetgewing nie nagekom word nie, waarvoor soveel mense nou met hul lewens moes betaal. Die impak van die oorstromings kon aansienlik minder gewees het as infrastruktuur in stand gehou is, as regulering reg plaasgevind het, as die nodige opgraderings wel op die regte tyd geskied het. Die regering se onvermoë en vroomheid, opsetlikheid veroorsaak 'n groter staatafhanklikheid, meer armoede, meer honger en 'n ewig groeiende werkloosheidssyfer. Mr. President, by failing to govern truthfully, failing to hold your cronies responsible, you are stealing children's dreams, stealing a nation's future, and stealing a country's legacy.
Time up, Honourable Member. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honourable A.M. Shaikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson, Honourable Speaker, President, Honourable members in the House. Allow me at the very outset to extend our condolences to the families of the 435 members of our society who lost their lives in this devastating floods. And very importantly, Minister of Police, I want to pay tribute to our police officer, the woman in blue, Bisisiwe Mjwara, who lost her life, selflessly trying to serve the interest of our people. Honourable President, yes, indeed, it's a natural disaster, but I think a lot of this could have been avoided. I must agree with Honourable Steenhuisen because I too have been making call after call after call, Honourable President, and the executive of eThekwini municipality was nowhere to be found. That is a fact. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, why do we need to wait for 435 people to lose their lives to ask the question, why, and why? Did we not see these people living on those riverbanks? Did we not see them living with these conditions where there's no proper water and sanitation? The stormwater drainage not working? Did we not know that these people are moving from rural areas into urban areas because there's not enough development in the rural areas? So what is the lesson that we need to learn here, Mr. President, in order to avoid, and you rightfully alluded to the fact that this is a natural disaster and we're going to have more of it, whether we like it or not. What are we going to do to prevent these things from happening in the future? Now we're going to move people to better ground. It's something we've said before. Let us start building houses in better ground with proper facilities for these people so they don't have to go through them. It's not difficult because we're building these houses, so let's build them under better ground, wood, water, sanitation, electricity there, so that they too can live with dignity. Now, Mr. President, many of these people that have lost their lives, their families are still in shock and pain. In this fund that we are creating, I hope that we will consider some compensation to these families who've lost their loved one, particularly the breadwinners. Many of them have lost their breadwinners. On the issue of the infrastructure, and I know that, Mr. President, you have repeatedly raised the issue of infrastructure and what we must do for economic growth in the country. When I was a councillor at eThekwini, we were losing about 27 to 30% of water on a daily basis. Today we're losing 50% because of poor maintenance. If infrastructure is one thing that can boost economic growth in this country, let us all work together so that we could be able to build proper infrastructure in the country. Lastly, I want to say that I'm very disappointed that with 435 people losing their lives, we come here today so easily forget these people are still reeling in pain and shock with the loved ones that they have lost, and we come here today and we want to grandstand, we want to insult and attack each other. Surely this is not the platform for it. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Honourable Hadebe.
Honourable Chairperson, the President of the Republic, and members of Parliament. The devastation caused by the recent floods in KwaZulu-Natal and some parts of the Eastern Cape have left a great deal of people with little hope and despair. The IFP has been on the ground assisting individuals and families. What we have been observing on the ground is that suffering is inconceivable, given the loss of families and property. Through our interactions with the affected people, we have observed and shared the pain with families and understood that for some, the devastation extends beyond just the loss of property and material concern. Many have lost their safe places of refuge and livelihoods. It is not difficult to see that the people in the devastated regions are in dire need of aid and necessities of food and clothes. Yet we are witnessing reports that some political party leaders merely come and show faces to give nothing in terms of assistance, or that certain political individuals receive preferential treatment in terms of water tankers being sent to their homes, and in a bid to cover up what is obviously wrong, their colleagues start to villainize the people of our country. Honorable Chairperson, what has been an even bigger tragedy is that some ward councillors from other opposition parties represented in KZN offer no presence, no assistance to the people that are clearly in need. Honorable President, I bring the above to light so that we can address the issues and set up the appropriate mechanisms to ensure effective governance during this period of rebuilding the lives of our people. We look forward to a response in this regard. However, it is proposed that for the time being, we need to establish working channels so that the people who need to access resources are able to do so effectively and urgently at local government levels. We must also empower our public watchdogs and NGOs to keep an eye on irregularities of public funds so that they have the best possible reach and not destroy the very fabric of public accountability. With these two recommendations, government will go a long way in addressing the needs of the public and building their confidence again. In closing, we wish to thank and remember our local and international donors who have quite generously donated funds to help rebuild and restore dignity to the people of our country. May the leadership of this country be the one that looks after their neighbor through servant leadership. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Khatebe. We'll move on to Honorable S.M. Jafta.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, egameni le-African Independent Congress masiwadlulise amazwi ovelwano kubo bonke abalahlekelwe ngamalungu emindeni nempahla yabo kwezikhukhula zidlulileyo e-KZN nase-Eastern Cape. Let's also appreciate and welcome the opportunity initiated by the President to this joint sitting. It really shows the seriousness and the urgency the government is taking the disaster in KZN and the Eastern Cape. The AIC is behind any initiative by any grouping, private sector and government aimed at giving the support to the affected people of KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. The Disaster Management Act passed by this Parliament 18 years ago demanded that the affected people of Kuku District, King Tlejoyo, Umgungundlovu, and the part of the Eastern Cape receive financial resources, humanitarian aid, and other related post-disaster relief support. We will monitor this process to the change. Honourable members, we are also mindful that procurement breaches are likely to take place amidst this humanitarian crisis, especially because the Section 217 provisions will not be applicable given the emergency of the situation at hand. In that case, we recommend that an audit process on potential service providers be in motion and any service rendered be audited to determine the value for money. Honorable Chairperson, this is the time to promote intergovernmental coordination. It is the time to foster intergovernmental relations between the spheres of government. We also wish to advise the House that for the purity and integrity of the procurement process, we must establish a whistleblower within the municipality to be chaired by the chairperson of the municipal account. This committee must make it possible for whistleblowers to report any irregularities in the process of providing relief to the affected communities. In closing, Chairperson, we should also look at the issue of locating our people to low-lying areas. That may include requesting some portions of land from the Ingonyama Trust for rural settlement in KZN. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be Honorable W.M. Madisha. Madisha.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, we are faced with a crisis. By 2010, there were over 77 floods in KZN alone, which led to 1,088 people dying. In 2019, there was another flood, which killed 85 people. Thousands of people were displaced and hundreds of them left homeless. The floods we are talking about today have led to the deaths and or disappearance of almost 500 people, 17,438 schools were destroyed, and 40,000 people are displaced. But even more, thousands of other people are affected in Port St. John's in the Eastern Cape, many others in Gauteng and the Northwest, and others, of course, in all the other provinces of our country. Your government literally does nothing to save people. What it is good at is to come to this house and say, please sleep well. Your government, sir, purports to be advanced, but it still lacks the capacity to assess and use the empirical evidence presented by the meteorological services to government. Even now, your government is ignoring what President Lazarus Chakwara, the president of Malawi, who is also the chairman of SADC, has called on African countries to use daily those services that I've spoken about. Their reports on a daily basis, which have indicated that more heavy rains and storms should be expected. Other countries have begun to deal with a tropical Jasmine, which is expected to make landfall this week, only 1 month after destruction left by Cyclone Egombe, which affected 20,000 people in Malawi and Mozambique. Mr. President, your government must do more. We need to see what is happening beyond our country, and all this kind of problems that we are faced with. Right now, we are going on. We are talking about what is happening in KZN and other provinces, but more stealing, like it has happened when we spoke about COVID, will be happening. I therefore beg you, Mr. President, and your government to look into this kind of things. Otherwise, the people of South Africa will be destroyed, like it is happening now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to Honorable Bibi. Honorable Bibi will speak from a seat.
Ngiyabonga sihlalo wendlu. Ngibingelele kumongameli wethu. Ngibingelele kusomlomo mama. Ngiphinde ngibingelele isekela somlomo baba. Ngiphinde ngibingelele kusihlalo we-NCOP no deputy wakhe. Chief Whip of NCOP Babu Mhaye no Chief Whip of Majority Party uMamuphem Majudina. Ngiphinde futhi ngibulise undunankulu waKwaZulu Natal Sihle Zikalala kanye nondunankulu wase Eastern Cape ubaba Mabuyane. Ngiyabonga ukuba ingxenye yale nkulumo mpikiswano yezikhukhula ezenze umonakalo omkhulu kwaZulu Natal namaphethelo. La kudlule khona emhlabeni abantu abaningi abadilizelwe izindlu. Kwakhona saba nabantu abaningi abashonayo. Kwakhona saba nabantu abaningi abangatholakali kuze kube namhlanje. Our deepest condolences go out to the families who have lost their loved ones, and may their souls rest in eternal peace. Slalo, this is one of the worst natural disasters that have happened in KwaZulu-Natal, which has had consequences way beyond their boundaries. The special sitting called by the President is a day of mourning for the victims of this natural disaster. Work in terms of humanitarian aid and recovery work has long commenced in KZN. We have been on the ground, crisscrossing the province and interacting with the communities on a daily basis to provide assistance where it is needed. Ingaba wena omhlophe ubukuphi lapho sihamba amageduka sobheka imndeni. The provincial government has commenced with the process of developing temporary residential units, which have started in Ilembe district, Ugu and eThekwini. The current forms in accommodate communities are residing in the community halls, churches, schools. They are also given blankets, mattresses, hot meals, and vanity packs, which are being provided by the Department of Social Development and NGOs. Asazi ukuthi ke hamaphi ke lama departments enithani waboni ngoba ukhongolo siwakhiphile onke asezinkalweni ayasebenza. And the KZN has established a nerve center, njengoba isibiza ngamasela nje. We have got a nerve center which work with Operation Sumasake. It is used for a drop-off center for relief of essential during this time of disaster. We have volunteers, field workers, working day and night, profiling bereaved families and ensuring with those families bathola usizo lo social relief, and also kwenza ukuba bathola ama-vouchers okudla, and also providing psychosocial services to all affected families and also victims of the floods. Simbonile lapha upremier wethu okwazile ukuthi makubonakala ukuthi imigwaqo leminye akwazeki ukuthi kuhambeke kuzona, wakwazi ukuthi anxenxe iparliament eliphezulu ukuthi bakwazi ukuthi ama-toll free asemvoti plaza nothongathi bakwazi ukuthi bakwazi abantu bayisebenzise. Ugovernment kakhongolose njalo loyo owenza zonke lezi zinto. Kuthe kusuka lapho sikwazile ukuthi ama-professional benze yonke into, o-social work, wenani, zonke izinto bebehamba besho phezulu. Kananjalo ngekaqedi nje parliament ehloniphekile. Simbonile umongameli wezwe nethimba lakhe beduduza imindeni eyehlelwe yilenhlekelele, bezithobile, ehlezi phansi ocansini, ekanye nabantu abasosizini. Simbonile undunankulu nethimba lakhe leshamthetho naye beduduza imindeni, bekhipha nezinsiza ukuthi imindeni isizakale. Sibonile kananjalo nemeya yeTheku igijima izinkalo zonke namakhansela awo ukuthi abantu bakwazi ukuthi basizakale. Sambona futhi uchief whip, sambona uchief whip wethu ohloniphekile uPhema Jodina nethimba lakhe egudla amahlathi, egudla amadwala, ewela imfula, ephethe icathulo ngezandla ukuze phela awele aye kuleya mizi entulayo edinga ukuthi siduduzwe. Ngiyabuza futhi ukuthi wena omhlopheke ubukuphi lapho thina siguduze lezi ndawo. Siyabonga kakhulu siKwaZulu-Natal province, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. That's how this government kaKhongolose yenza ukuthi wonke umuntu azange sikhethe ukuthi wena wavotela iphi inhlangano kodwa siqinisekile ukuthi wonke umuntu akwazi athole kodwa onke abakayikhonje bebengabonwa ndawo behamba nje ukuthebelela beyongena emahholo ezona ndawo lezi ebekuyezabo ke bengafuni uba thina sibe khona simbonile uTransnet assessor yonke damage ye rail ne network ko network in terms of ukuthi kudinga ukuthi kwenziwe ini kana njalo siyibonile no Prasa oqinisekisa ukuthi online bestimela kwi province abadamejekile ukuthi bayenzeka siyabonga kakhulu Khongolose omkhulu eprovinsini esilidayo leader weANC ningadideki lokuthi nikwazi ukuthi normalize isimo ebesinjengeba njoba kwenzekile kodwa kumnandi ukuthi njoba betha amanzi lawatholakala nje cha eThekwini kuimprove kakhulu at least u60% eThekwini abantu sebathola amanzi inner and outer west region and north region
as you conclude
of 50% no 42% no gesi ngokunjalo sengivala ke sihlalo wami uprima wethu nkosiyami joba elapha ngwethu behambe bemtshela ama fake news ukuthi nako water tank lalelani bantakwethu thina suhulumeni osebenzayo ebantwini lo tank le yayihamba iye ebantwini ngoba bekunalokho ukuthi tank mayiphumile nina hijack siyabonga esihlalo wethu ngokwenzekile.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Honorable M. Nyonso. Order, members.
Chairperson, Your Excellency, Comrade President, we speak here on behalf of the millions who are landless and therefore find themselves having to be squashed into inhuman living conditions, which are commonly known as squatter camps, as they are in search of a better life for all in urban areas. What transpired in KZN and Eastern Cape was a demonstration of the consequences of global warming. It requires full attention by the government and the whole of civil society in partnership to repair the damages and make it a point that wherever possible in future, such devastation is not able to recur and destroy many lives again like this one has done. Let us remember that there were similar floods in Durban area in 2019, which were to a smaller scale. We should have taken that as a warning sign. Engineers and other people with the relevant skill set should have been immediately deployed at the juncture to set off this threat. What are the bitter lessons? As alluded earlier, infrastructure development must be maintained at a higher standard for bulk services such as underground flooding and water and sanitation facilities. Proper care must be taken to ensure that housing contracts with standards are maintained. It is very clear that many houses were allowed to be built in areas that were not geologically safe to do so. Habitats must be built in an environment that is safe and secure and are in line with the local authorities' correct usage of the land parcels. The PAC says it is the opportune time for the government to get rid of squatter camps. Here is an opportunity to finally demolish the legacy of apartheid urban planning. Can this government inspire our people and bring hope on this front? Can the government work with organizations such as Abahlali Basemjondolo to create a new legacy for our children going forward? We only pray and hope that the executive authority under the care of the ANC will not divert attention to itself for the usual greed and selfness of its operatives. Sobukwe, Mutupeng, Limbete, and many more are rolling in their graves when they know that there are posters going around on social media about the government employees being hyenas lasting after the disaster relief fund. It is too much now. Corruption must end now, right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be Honorable the Premier of the Eastern Cape. Order.
Thank you very much, the Chairperson of the Council of Provinces. Greetings to you and greetings to the Speaker of the National Assembly, His Excellency, the President of our Republic, the presiding officers, honorable members of the House. I'm also noting ministers and deputy ministers, the Premier of KZN. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. There is a saying in Tibetan that goes, and I quote, "Tragedy should be used as a source of strength, no matter what sort of difficulties, how painful experience is. If we lose our hope, that is our real disaster." As we gather here as servants of the people of our country, we must use this session constructively and at the same time give our people hope in their moment of despair. Indeed, time to work together is now, as eloquently articulated by the President earlier. Abantu base KZN, nabantu base Mpuma Kapa, abantu base Northwest, abalindelanga ukuva sikutakuthana apha namhlanje, sigxekana, kwaye sityabekana ngezityholo ezingekhoyo. Balindele ukusiva sithetha ngezisombululo zokubuyisela ubomi babo esiqhelweni emveni kwentlekele echaphazele intlalo yabo. Bafuna ukusiva sithetha ngoncedo esiza kubanika lona ekwakheni ngokutsha amakhaya abo, izikolo, ikliniki, imigaqo yezithuthi namashishini athe achatshazelwa zizikhukhula zemvula. Eyona nto intlungu ngexesha lentlekele kukuphulukana nobomi babantu bakuthi. Siyancedisa kuzo zonke iintsapho eziphulukene namalungu kule ntlekele. Njengoko sisazi abantu abasolekele KZN, abanye babo basuka e-Eastern Cape. Ndiyafuna ukuqaphela nokukhumbula uCaptain Pierre Max owathi naye wasutywa kukufa ehlangula abantu kula disaster ye-floods zase Buffalo City in January, eshiya ifamily yakhe esebenzela isizwe. The loss of over 400 lives and destruction of both social and economic infrastructure just in one natural disaster is unprecedented in our country and has affected families in both Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal and Northwest. Sidinga ilima likarhulumente, imibutho engekho phantsi korhulumente noosomashishini babucala ukuphakamisa abantu bakuthi kule ntlekele. Andisiso isanuse semoyozulu President, nawe Honorable Speaker, kodwa ndiyafuna ukuthi urhulumente kazwelonke nowephondo lalapha eNtshona Kapa mabalungiselele intlekele enokwehla eNtshona Koloni kule mvula siyazi into kokuba imvula zabo ziyaxhaphaka apha ebusika. Siyibonile i-challenge kwi-Eastern Seaboard is likely to extend. Honorable Speaker, the natural disasters have become a constant occurrence in our province of the Eastern Cape. The 5 districts of Owari Tambo, Alfred Nzo, Christiani, Amatoli, and Jogabi are prone to natural disasters, and 3 of them have been hit twice by natural disasters in the past 10 years. These natural disasters are in various forms and include tornadoes, storms, and the recent floods that have hit parts of our province since the start of the summer season, with Buffalo City Metro being the hardest hit by these catastrophic floods in January this year. It is important to inform the honorable members of the National Assembly and the South African nation that whilst assessment is being underway on the impact of the current disaster in our province, we can highlight the following related incidents. Nearly 1,000 people have been grossly affected by the homelessness and damages to private property. Over 1,900 temporal shelters are required urgently as a short-term response measure. More than 5 villages have been left without water and electricity supply due to damaged water and sanitation infrastructure. 10 schools and 12 health facilities have been damaged in OR Tambo and Christiani districts. Damage to agricultural infrastructure in some municipalities will affect the 2022 harvest and agricultural yields. More than 170 roads have been irreparable damage in our province, mostly rural roads, thereby disconnecting our communities to critical service centers such as schools, hospitals, and towns. The immediate intervention we have deployed include road repairs in OR Tambo and Jolgabi, provision of psychosocial support to victims and affected communities, and provision of water cutting. More than 1,800 temporal shelters and 424 housing units will be constructed in the province for victims of the disasters. Mandithethe President here that abantu basezilalini bayazibona i-RDP houses bayazi-appreciate bafuna uvuselwa imizi yabo. If someone has lost about a 5-room house, ufuna ukokhelwa nje landlu ibethelelwe ngokutsha sisebenze sibheke phambili. The magnitude and impact of this current disaster requires large-scale support from the national government because our own resources are severely constrained. We have still not fully recovered from the effects of the previous disaster that hit 5 of our districts and Buffalo City Metro between 2013 and to date. The total cost of those disasters were estimated at 1.1 billion, and we did not receive any funding to respond to those disasters. In the current disaster, indications from the assessment that are being done will need more than 2 billion to rebuild affected infrastructure in our communities. We plead for agility in the national government as well to process so that we can respond timelessly to these disasters as the most vulnerable and poor people are severely affected. We must lift the dark cloud of hopelessness and despair that is lingering over the heads of our people. The disaster also requires a long-term solution from all of us because they are caused by climate change. What that means is that in the provision of social and economic infrastructure, we ought to integrate climate change mitigation as part of our planning and designs. Mr. President and Deputy President, South Africa is signatory to the Paris Agreement, which is a legal binding international treaty on climate change that was signed on the 12th December 2015 and took effect on the 4th of November 2016. In accordance with this agreement, we ought to commit to the goal of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. It is therefore important that we also understand that our long-term low greenhouse gas emission strategy entails going forward. If we do not honor these global climate change commitments, protocols, and declarations, we will continue to encounter the disastrous effects of the natural disasters. Mr. President, Honorable Speaker, my considered view is that we can not afford to rest on our laurels as a country. We have got to double our efforts and combat these devastating effects of climate change and global warming. Between 1980 and 2019, we have witnessed an increase in both storms and floods, with landslides featuring on minimal scale. We are noting with great concern that landslides are gaining momentum, in particular in KZN. The climate change crisis puts an immense amount of pressure on the scarce resources that we have at our disposal as government. Equally, it puts the government system on trial as these disasters often impact on our communities badly. Let these disasters be a moment of re-strategizing and reimagining and a just and a sustainable future for all. Our first line of defense is planning and development of quality plans that are informed by ISO norms and standards. Provision of human settlement plans and designs will help our people understand why they cannot build settlement on flood plains and dolomitic areas. More importantly, we must deal decisively with the cause of climate change, which is greenhouse gas emission. We believe our country is on the right track to contribute towards carbon neutrality by 2050. We must heighten direct funding and invest efforts towards ensuring a just transition to renewable energy that will not devastate.
You conclude.
Okay. We really stand here Pardon me, ningena apha nina. Thank you very much. We really wanted to express our sincere word of gratitude. We are really humbled by the support we have received from South Africans across our country, and we really hope that this is time for all of us to work together and assist those who are in dire need of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now proceed to Al Jamaa, Honorable M.G.E. Hendricks.
Speaker, Chair, His Excellency, Honourable Premiers, reports from our constituency in Omdoni and eThekwini, where we have an MPEC member and we have councillors, is that the Premier and the Mayor of eThekwini are on the ground helping communities. Thank you very much, Premier. It did not go unnoticed, Speaker, that soon after the devastating floods, the nation saw that the Chief Whip of Parliament giving a helping hand and President Ramaphosa squatting on the floor of a victim to comfort them. Many other honourable members also went the extra mile. Parliament, Speaker, displayed Ubuntu, of which we can be proud of. Al Jamaa dispatched its relief workers in the Ugu district, and as you know, the Ugu district, Honourable President, is part of your second smart city. And we briefed many NGOs and assisted with the release of bodies for burial. It is clear that the 6 parliaments in their budget processes underestimated the harm apartheid neglect caused to infrastructure for villages and towns. Most aid is going to cities like eThekwini and not to the real disadvantaged areas where our constituency is, especially in the Ugu district. Honourable Speaker, dilapidated water infrastructure prior to the high rainfall and floods in many of our small municipalities was a big blow. The infrastructure of Ward 13 is specifically in a bad condition, as well as Malangeni in Wards 8 and Ward 9 in Umdoni municipality. Thousands of children were virtually blown out of the water. Small municipalities are not capacitated to deal with such disasters. All they have is flimsy tents. What happened to the 2007 disaster management bill that required all municipalities to have a comprehensive and proactive disaster management plan? It is clear that South Africa do not have the capacity to deal with national disasters. I want to say that if we should have an earthquake, you can imagine people will say we are a failed state. Lastly, Honourable Speaker, it's important that the National Development Plan be revisited, because I don't think it took into account the devastation we had to our infrastructure, and they need to build in resources to ensure that the National Development Plan will help prevent such disasters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Honourable Tim Proteseth. Honourable Prim.
Thanks. Honourable Speaker, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable President, Honourable Members, fellow South Africans. I would like to join in expressing my sincere sympathy to the victims of this crisis, and I certainly wish all of them the love and strength they need on this journey of healing. Honourable President, you said earlier that this storm, this devastating event, was due to climate change. Whilst that assumption may be true, The problem with it is that it creates a foundation of plausible deniability for officials. Officials can say that this was a one-off event and they had no way of knowing it was coming. The reality in KZN, colleagues, is different. If we turn back the pages of history, we will see that flooding is common in KZN. Between April 1856 and October 2017, on no less than 10 occasions, in the same coastal area, we've had rainfall of between 250 to 400 millimeters in one day, causing widespread infrastructure damage. So the eThekwini municipality should have seen this coming and should have been prepared for it. It was bound to happen. And the eThekwini municipality was certainly warned. On the 10th of April, the South African Weather Service issued a level 2 warning of a cut-off low system. Now, for those of you who need a brush up in your geography from high school, as I did, a cut-off low, also known as a weatherman's woe, is a weather system that hovers over an area for a couple of days, a number of days, and just dumps everything that's in it on that region without respite. A day later, 11 April, South African Weather Services upgraded the level to a level 8, and later that day made it a level 9. The warnings were dire. Widespread flooding of roads and settlements, loss of life, infrastructure damage, displacement of communities, widespread mudslides and rockfalls, widespread and prolonged disruption of municipal services. The South African Weather Service got it exactly right. But did the eThekwini municipality take the time to warn its residents of this? Now, this municipality always touts its Facebook as a reliable source of information. It is a wide network. It has over 430,000 followers, a perfect conduit for information and warnings. But if you go and analyze that page, as I have, for the time period of 10 to 12 April, you will find the following: notifications of normal power outings, notifications relating to the submission of budget proposals, a caution to stop littering to prevent drain damage, a bit late, an Eskom load shedding notice, but there was no disaster weather warning alert. But despite this fact, Mayor Kaunda, on the 12th of April, conducted a media briefing. And he said in that media briefing that as soon as they were warned by South African Weather Service, they posted it. That is completely and utterly false. It's proven. They did not do it. They did not give the residents of eThekwini any warning of the level 9 threats that were coming their way. Now, in my area, people died in their homes. I wonder how many people could have been saved if they were told that one of the worst storms in a generation was coming their way, if they'd evacuated their homes. So if we look at the response, what about, we know there was no warning. If we look at the response, what was that like? Now, the disaster management plan in eThekwini, there actually is one, says that you're supposed to try and mitigate loss rather than try and prevent it. Well, it emphasizes both. This is the first failure. Nothing could be done to stop the storm, but certainly a lot could be done to mitigate it. There was no capacity for evacuations. In the critical hours between 10 and 12 April, when the Isopingo Basin flooded again for the umpteenth time, there was not one helicopter to help people. There was not one helicopter to help people be evacuated. That was arranged by private citizens in their boats and their vehicles, and it was coordinated by a DA ward councillor. It's the truth, I'm sorry it hurts. In Otongati, one of our senior public reps, a ward councillor, threw herself into the Otongati River to try and save people in the absence of search and rescue efforts. In terms of water, the already failing infrastructure has been decimated. Here's the situation. eThekwini has got 105 water tankers. That's what their fleet says. In reality, there are only 75 of them that work. This is a city with 4 million residents. 4 million residents with 75 tankers. That's 16,000 litres for every 53,000 people. It's absolutely and utterly impossible to handle that situation. Now, I don't want to get involved in Tankergate, but the reality is that I have a WhatsApp from the Premier to the provincial leader of the DA saying that I've never contacted Councillor Pullen. I don't even have his number. And what I will say is it's interesting that the residents of eThekwini now refer to tankers as Zikalalas. In conclusion, Mr. President, this was a disaster that should have been foreseen and adequately prepared for. Despite the best efforts of technicians, search and rescue, emergency responders and councillors, the administration has failed to mitigate the disaster. For the umpteenth time, Mr. President, people have been left to fend for themselves. Mr. President, to conclude, there are three types of people in this world when it comes to decision making. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. In this case, like the cut-off low, the ANC-led administration in Durban stayed stationary for days while this disaster played out, watching and wondering what was happening. Mr. President, the ad hoc committee will be on the ground in KZN. We will watch every cent spent. And let's start with the fact that initial estimates were 950 billion. Now they've been revised to 17 billion. We'll start there.
Time is up.
Okay. Mr. President, decisive action is required from you to address these issues. If you do not, Mr. President, the people of this country will rise up and take action into their own hands. Mr. President, we pray that you will heed this warning. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be the Chief Whip of the Majority Party, Honorable Pemi Matwadina.
Ababhexeshi bobabini bale parlamente namhlanje, Mongameli obekekileyo, amalungu ezindlu zombini, opremier bobabini abakhoyo apha. Ilusizi into yoba emva kokuba abantu bakowethu besiva kabuhlungu bejongise iminqonqo ezantsi kuzomiwa kule ndawo kuchithwane kubekho abo bathi yinto eyenziwe ngebomu. Kubani onesakhono sokwenza izantyala-ntyala emazikhukhulise abantu. Kubonakala ukuphelelwa bubuntu kuthi. Abanye ke bathetha bengazange baye bayothetha nabantu base KZN nabantu base Eastern Cape. Thina inyawo zinodaka. Sisuka pha, don't ask me that. Sisuka phaya singene imiwewe namanxweme sawela imifula. Sisondela kubantu bakowethu abasifunayo ngalomzuzu. Ndithi ke kubo, Honorable Speaker, ngicela i-protection. This honorable member cannot say sis to me. Ndime apha. You said it.
Honorable members, I guess we should just remind each other that although we can heckle and so on, there's no way in which heckling can be helpful if we can't hear what the speaker is saying. In any way, dialogue is forbidden. Please proceed, Chief Whip.
Enkosi ngokungenelela. Kumele ke into yoba President sivume sibulele kuwe icabinet oyikhokhelayo iye yatsiba kwangoko yangena eKZN icabinet oyikhokhelayo nangoku ndithetha amalungu amanye wecabinet awekho apha oko ayesebenza eKZN esebenza eEastern Cape makwaye masiwaqhwabele siwabulele. ngabantu abayaziyo into yoba bathunyiwe bahambe bedlala bayile bayosondela ebantwini bakowethu beva inhlungu yabo lanja yomkhondo ebeyihamba kunye nomama ubusisiwe Mjwarha ibisenza umsebenzi wobuthandazwe nayo yafumana isiwela kulangosi sithi ke ngelixesha siyensi umanyano ngamandla masikhalisane nabantu bakowethu kwinhlungu abanayo enakikoduwo ha hona le koduwo he o tshwanetse gore re sebedisane mmoho re le setšhaba sa South Africa. We have an obligation as the people's government to ensure that we intervene at an appropriate time, and that you have done, President, that you have done, Premier, Honorable. Amazwi, kanithule nina. Amazwi ovelwano awonelanga ukungena kumakhaya ajongane nokufa siyile kwimingcwabo seva ubuhlungu sithethe nabantu sahlala nabo phansi khaya la kwamakhanya ubone ibhokisi ezintathu nezine zomzi omnye lonto yodwa ithi wanga uThixo woxolo nothando angangenelela anibophe aniqinise amalungu akhoyo apha weparlamente amaninzi ayile phaya ebantwini ava inhlungu yabantu asebenza nabantu kwaye kufuneka sibulele abantu abaye phaya bayongenelela siyayiqonda ke mongameli into yoba xa kunje umthwalo xa usindayo ubanga ugxekwa-gxekwana wonke umuntu ufuneka efumene into yoba isizathu soba makugxekwe lo rhulumente okungathi siyazenza izantyala-ntyala as if we are creating those floods. Those were natural disasters and they are attended to by our government. Le ad hoc committee eyenziwe namhlanje le ad hoc committee eyenziwe namhlanje ngalama ngezparlament ngezindlu zimbini wena ngezindlu zimbini izawuqinisekisa into yoba sihamba kunye nani kuba imali ezawusetyenziswa yile mali ivotelwa yile parliamente sizawuhamba kunye nani sincedisane into yoba umahluko wenzeke kwaba yabantu. We welcome the technical teams that have been established to work with the Disaster Management Center. Our government was coordinating all the programs. Siwabonile abalungu kaRhulumente engasebenzi in silos esebenza kunye kodwa wena mama manungxola kakhulu man tyhini wethu. Dear leader, with due respect, we cannot come and do political standing at the expense of the pain that our people have done. Ungandikhombi wena. And Honorable Groeneveld, to say disasters are not
honorable members.
To say disasters are man-made, that is not true. Mr. Dujoit, same to you. Bokufanele ba noko intloni ziyanakha. Ukuza nizoma apha nithethe into engeyonyani ngenhlungu nokudandatheka kwemiphefumulo yabantu bakowethu singenelele singulombutho kwaye sisazawungenelela njengoba besitsho honorable uBhebhe into yoba sihambe sisondele ebantwini bakowethu sesiqalile uthetha nabo ingakumbi abo bakhe kwi-low lying areas nakwi-river banks into yoba kwafuneka bavume urhulumente abasuse kweza ndawo ababeke ezindaweni apho sizawuthatha nomhlaba lo siwafake kuwo ngoba kumelekile. As part of ubuntu masinikeleni sinikele kubantu bakowethu siqokelele konke oko esinako sibabonile ke abantu besithi urhulumente ewe sihleli kwezindawo nisibeke kuso kodwa khanenze ngokukhawuleza with the capable government of the KZN, the national government, the eThekwini government. Lonto iza kwenziwa sikhokhela abantu bakuthi ingakuhlekisa ngalomzuzu ngoba kumandi kuwe awukho kula meko ingahlekisa ngalomzuzu kodwa ngenye imini lo mazinyo azabazinyanda. Yinhlekele lento esikuyo. Uthixo wamamnyange makasikelele iAfrika. Ababantu kuthi obayi 435 masimfulufa ifake lamveku yase Port St John sibingcwatshe izolo. By 436 abantu abathe basoleka kulenhlekele amakhaya emkile omakhelwane sibabonile entuzuma kwa 59 apho bendikhona apho otata nomama amathandazo abavuke ngobusuku bayohlangula abantu abadala ubunye bubonakele phaya into yoba thina singabantu bomzantsi Afrika siyakwazi ukusebenza kunye. However, it is imperative that proper planning must occur at all times. The current assessment by the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development and Land Reform on the extent of damage agricultural production is awusincedisa into yoba kungalanjwa ngoba ezi floods zizawuzisa indlala, ezi floods zizawuzisa into yoba kungakwazi into yoba kuphinde kulimeke. Sithi ke qhubekani nomsebenzi omhle eniwenzayo kuminister ojongane nezindlu esimbonileyo into yoba kuyangenelelwa kukhawuleziswa into yoba abantu mababe nendawo zokuhlala. Sithi nangaleyo siyayinika inkxaso yethu engagungqiyo. Le committee yenziwe apha izawukhawulezisa ekubeni ijonge ngaphaya kwezinhlekele into yoba ukuze sakhe kakutsha uMzantsi Afrika kufuneka senze ntoni na. Whereas government in the global north respond to such events by borrowing on capital markets at low cost in order to finance stimulus and investment packages, Africa and countries in the global south have to rely on small amounts of financial support. The ANC calls on presiding officers of parliament to urgently convene the national dialogue on climate change. Going forward, to impact on climate change, lanto ibizwa global warming imfudumalo yesibhakabhaka. Uthini? Awuzuphinda. We know, we have observed, we have seen what transpired in Mozambique. And nathi singumzantsi Afrika saye sazibona sichaphazeleka. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Speaker, it is important that you must also say, as the ANC, we are deeply conscious of the fact that with regards with 16,000 households that have been affected, the shelters, temporary shelters are really needed, but also that must be done in consultation with our communities. The infrastructure that has been affected, it also affected the economy of KZN, and we are happy that the economy is now restored in stages by this government of KZN, and we thank them very much for acting swiftly to ensure that abantu bakowethu abasokoli mahala ixesha elide. Madagascar are now being experienced in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of the Eastern Cape with large areas of land below sea level, especially the vulnerable. That the discussions with the Presidency on special development planning for the future, new construction and infrastructure materials that will be more resistant to climate change going forward are much needed. This has a major implication for roads, houses and other infrastructure in the rebuilding process. Siyayazi into yoba sisuka kwimeko ezinzima. Imeko apho besisuka kwi-COVID-19 sathi singeka recovery kwi-July unrest kwafika ezantyala. Sithi uThixo wamanyange makangenelele asindise abone izwe lakowethu azaxolele izono zalo abasingathe abo basentlungwini ngalomzuzu. ANC ayinawuze ihlekise ngentlungu yokusolekelwa ngabantu kwaye sizawusebenza nabo bantu bahamba kunye nathi siyazibulela inkxaso nathi siyi-ANC esisifumeneyo sakwazi ukungena ngaphaya.
Chief Whip.
Tata. tata mandibulele kakhulu kodwa siyayixhasa le okungenelela karhulumente nina.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed and have a response from the President.
Yes. I'd love some water. Thank you, Speaker of the National Assembly, Somlo Momama, and Chairperson of the NCOP, I suppose we would say Sitlalo Baba, the Deputy President, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, the Premier of the Eastern Cape, ministers, and honorable members. I wish to express my deep appreciation to Parliament for convening this joint session. I must thank each one of you as members who've just spoken here today. Just your standing up here to express your thoughts and your views and those of your party speaks to the importance that you have ascribed to what has happened to our people in all these 3 provinces, including the city of Cape Town. It shows compassion, and it has demonstrated also solidarity. The contributions made today should give encouragement to all South Africans that their representatives are indeed engaged with the issues that affect them deeply. And I wish to thank a number of you here as representatives of our people who have taken time to go out, particularly to KZN, and who've walked the ground and been amongst our people. Honorable Bibi provided some real colorful details about how members of this House, as well as the Premier of KZN, and various civil servants have spent time meeting people who are affected. So for many of you who've gone out to see what has happened, thank you very much, and I thank you on behalf of our people. Now, all this confirms that this Parliament has taken its responsibility to exercise oversight and ensure accountability seriously. And I welcome the decision to establish an ad hoc joint committee on flood disaster relief and recovery to assess the overall impact of the damage, the response and the relief measures that are being implemented by government. And I'm pleased that this decision has been taken rather quickly. And I thank the Chief Whip for outlining to me the task of this ad hoc committee, and I wish this committee well as it executes its task. This is an important step taken by this Parliament to oversee the response and the implementation of these relief measures, to give the people of this country confidence that every effort is being made to address their needs. And in the course of doing all this, there will be some mistakes that will be made. There will be a number of gaps. And I think rather than blame shifting, rather than grandstanding. We should treat this as a national effort, a national disaster, and act together. This is not a time to score points. Quite frankly, this is a time to say, these are our suggestions, this is how we believe you should be responding, rather than during a time of mourning, when people are in great pain, where we are throwing stones at one another. This should not be the way, as South Africans, we should be responding. Now, many valuable proposals have been made on how we can effectively respond both to this disaster as well as, and I want to thank you for this, for future nature events that will strike our country and our people. We welcome the contributions that honorable members have made on the principles that need to guide the work of rebuilding and recovery. Honorable Lucas spoke about joint planning, and she also said, through this we should find a way of strengthening the district development model, because as she said, it will serve us well even as we handle disasters like this. Honorable Mkalipi spoke eloquently about how we can better equip our municipalities to be able to handle these disasters in future, and I thank her for those remarks. Honorable Groenewald spoke about the need for prayer and action. And this is the one time when I realized that, yes, prayer and action should work together, and I agree that we should go beyond prayer and act decisively, which is precisely what he was asking for. Honorable Swart spoke well about the need for stewardship of the public resources that are going to be made available. So several speakers have drawn attention to the need for an urgent and coordinated and concerted effort to address the effects and challenges of climate change. They have made the point that these floods have highlighted the tragic realities of climate injustice. Yes, warnings should have been heeded, but I think what we should now be doing is to say, what do we do to ensure that we mitigate future disasters? Those least responsible for climate change, especially those living in conditions of poverty, are often most severely impacted by its consequences, as a number of you have said here. Climate action must be a fundamental part of our developmental agenda and must inform every aspect of our planning, budgeting, construction, and infrastructure going forward. Honorable Luthuli suggested that we must have early warning systems, and I think she's right. Suppose the South African Weather Service does give warnings, but those warnings need to be heeded. Honorable Zungula made wonderful suggestions about town planning, as well as protection of vegetation and how best we can address the type of disasters that we might have in future. I enjoyed listening to Honorable Dutoit, who spoke about dreams. The dreams of our people have been crushed and shattered, and our collective responsibility now is to how to rebuild our people's dreams. And I hope that he does join all of us in rebuilding those dreams rather than being on the critical side. Several speakers have made references to concerns about the potential for the abuse of resources and the misappropriation of relief funds. I thank those speakers that acknowledged the measures that government is putting in place to minimize the possibility of theft or misuse of funds. Premier Zikalala emphatically stated here that the process of spending the resources will be corruption-free and that the contracts, listen first, and that is where our problem is. We don't listen to one another. Now, what he said was that we are going to make sure that the contracts are going to be pre-audited. What we should now be saying as Parliament, having set up this ad hoc committee, is to say, how can we work with you as you go about this process that you are setting in place to ensure that there is going to be pre-auditing of the contracts. This is where Parliament should come into its own. And I'd like to thank the Premier for this unequivocal statement about the utilization of public funds and resources. Honorable Kwakwa welcomes the audits, and it is wonderful that he is one of those who recognizes that there are measures that are being put in place. And our task as an oversight Parliament is to make sure that these measures do indeed take effect. In addition to these measures, we're